In this video, I'll be making some small Christmas decorations for inside the house. I'm kind of making these for me, but you could also make them as gifts or to sell as well. I start out by putting pencil to paper to draw out some simple Christmas trees, but you can also look for some Christmas tree silhouettes or images online. I figure I can just draw my own, and I don't really want them to be cookie cutter all the same anyway, so I tax my limited drawing capabilities and come up with something acceptable, I think. I draw several and in slightly different sizes, so they'll all be different. For the second project, I'm ripping down some scrap 2x lumber into 1.5 inch pieces so they'll be roughly square. I need 15 or 16 inches usable in total. I take those to the miter saw to cut them down to what I need. I need one about 4 inches or so, one 5 inches, and one 6 or thereabouts. So then it's time to transfer these rather simple drawings onto some wood. And by looking at them, you'll probably get an idea of what I'm making with my 2x2s. I'm making a set of 3, and I'm going to experiment a little with this part and make 3 slightly different ones. Moving on to the trees, I have to shop around a bit to find a board wide enough for the widest tree I drew, but I have plenty of offcuts to choose from. And some of these are 3/4 inches thick and some are slightly thinner, around 1/2 inch to 5/8, but you could use either. I like to draw them out on paper first and then transfer the outline to the board. That way I basically have a drawing I can use over again if I want to make more. I ended up drawing 4 trees in total, and I'm going to make a standalone one and also a set of 3 on a base. Here I'm marking out a couple of shapes, well, the same shape really, but in 2 different sizes, and these are going to be angels. I'm making 2 with this method, and then I'm making one slightly differently to show you both ways. Plus I couldn't decide which design I like better, so I'm doing both. When in doubt, do it all. And before you say, hey, those angels don't have wings, I'm making those as separate pieces. And here those are. And here's a good example of how my brain gets locked into something. I use the transfer paper to do the non-cutout drawings, but these wings are a cutout, so I don't need to use the transfer paper. I can just draw around the cutout. Duh. It occurred to me as soon as I started drawing, but once I started, I just kept going, so you can get a good laugh at me being absent-minded. Anyway, I ditched it for the second one. Hey, I got 2 angels and 2 sets of wings out of the same board. Back to the transfer paper for the third angel, and you can see this one's a bit different design. I did originally draw this one with the cutout method, fold and cut out to make it symmetrical. I drew half of it and then folded it and then cut it out to make each side the same, but I ended up tracing it onto another piece of paper because I didn't like the head on that. I thought it was too small, and I wanted to get it more round. So I traced it onto this sheet and then used something, I don't remember what now, to make this the head rounder and a little bigger. So I think that looks a little bit better, and that's why I had to use the tracing paper instead of just tracing around this one. Now it's on to the bandsaw to cut these shapes out. And yes, the other pieces just vibrated right off the stand and onto the floor. You could use a jigsaw for these, especially if you were cutting them out of a large board to be more stable, but if you're using smaller pieces like I am, the bandsaw is a better choice. Really, a scroll saw would be an even better choice for these smaller and more intricate shapes and detailed cuts. I haven't shown you any scroll saw work yet, but I plan to use that in some future projects, so you'll see that in some videos down the road. I had quite a bit of bandsaw work to cut all these shapes out, so I won't bore you with all of it, but I will show you some of the results. Here's one of the angels. The Christmas trees were the easiest to cut out. They had more gentle curves that the saw could follow a little better. I pretty much just followed the lines on most of this stuff since it was not all that critical to get it exactly as drawn. Oh, this is what we got so far. Now for some sanding and finishing off. Of course, there's sanding, and most of it was hand sanding for all this intricate stuff. I used a Sureform wood shaver to knock down the corners of what you have probably surmised by now are candles. I use this thing more than you would think. It comes in handy to quickly knock edges down, and other things too, of course. It's one of those tools that's so inexpensive there's no downside to buying one. I'll leave a link in the description like I always do for stuff I use and recommend if you're interested. Anyway, all the hand sanding I did was just with sheet sandpaper folded up to get in some of the tight areas. I also was able to do a little bit on the belt and disc sander for some of the pieces, like the angels and candles, and I'm not going to show you all of this, but there was an interesting event that took place while I was using the belt sander. It happens when I'm doing this angel right here. Wait for it. All is going fine, and yep, it hit the ceiling. I figured it was toast, but believe it or not, the piece was unharmed. Luckily, it did not hit me or the window, which is just to my left. It happened because the belt was literally coming apart at the seam, and that split caught the corner of the angel and sent it flying. Trying to get to heaven, I guess. Anyway, that's what can happen when your belt starts to do this. Should have changed it a little sooner, apparently. So after a quick break to get a new belt in place, I continued on where I left off when I was so rudely interrupted. It seemed like there was a huge amount of sanding, but it was due to the fact that I made so many of these small items all at once. And here's my solution to being covered in dust. I keep an electric leaf blower by the door of the shop, and I can just step outside with it and blow off the sawdust or metal dust or grass clippings or whatever the day's work was, so I don't take it into the house. It works pretty well. So back to it the next day. I had a thought the previous evening that I would cup out the tops of the candles on the belt sander, because that's kind of the way candles look when they burn, so that's what I'm doing here. And this is one of the bases for this stuff. That's right, all the angels and trees need a base to hold them up. I'm sanding this one to an irregular shape with sort of a live edge to use as the base for the single Christmas tree. I'll also use a base like this for the larger angel. So now for some assembly. The two smaller angels have their wings pinned on their backs, so I'm just using a dab of glue and a single brad nail for each one. And the brad nail isn't really needed. I'm just using it to hold the wings in place for the glue to dry. That is, if I could get this glue bottle open. It's stuck. Got to get a tool. Now, where did I leave that jackhammer? Okay, glue bottle finally uncorked, and I can proceed. Anyway, the nail also lets me pin them on and then turn the wings a bit to straighten them if necessary. So I set those two aside to dry and move on to the other stuff. For the larger angel, I'm attaching it to one of the cedar bases, so I just kind of line up in the approximate center of the base and drill a hole with a countersink on the bottom, and I'll just hold it on with one screw. I'll also drill a pilot hole in the base of the angel to get the screw started in. Makes it easy to get them lined up and screwed together. For the trees, I'm putting 3 of them together on this one base, so I just put them on there to see how they look. Needs a little adjustment. Then another look. Okay, looks good, so I marked the locations. I didn't need the base that long, so I took it over and cut it down on the miter saw. That looks good. Drill from the top where the marks are. Then countersink from the bottom, and they're ready to assemble. Oh wait, forgot to drill the bases of the trees. Got to do that. Now we're ready. Oh, need a couple more screws. Okay, now I can put it together. Well, maybe not. I decided since this base is thinner, I need shorter screws. You guys get the impression that I do this stuff without really having a plan? I do seem to get it done, though, eventually. Now for the candles. These don't need bases as they can stand on their own, but I need to attach the flames to the candles. There are a couple ways to do this. You could glue them right to the tops of the candles. You could use a small dowel as a wick. What I'm doing is drilling a small hole in the top of each candle and a hole in the bottom of each flame to receive a short piece of wire. And I'm using an old wire coat hanger to cut those pieces from. Those old hangers come in handy. I've even used them for welding rod in a pinch for oxyacetylene welding. There's a lost art. Anyway, a few 1.5-inch pieces of hanger makes these odd pieces of wood look a lot like holiday candles. Okay, the glue is probably dry enough to finish up these angels now. So I do the same routine on those, drilling the bases, drilling pilot holes, and attaching each with a single screw. The bases are just small rectangles of the offcuts from the other pieces. And there those are. All the builds are complete, ready for some finish and a little embellishment. So there they are after adding a few frills. I did just some hard wax oil on the cedar bases, and the rest is paint. Did just white on the angels, and of course you see there the 2 different styles of angels with the wings on the back, and then just the full cutout. And the 3 trees on the base. And the holiday candles. And you can see I did the flames a little bit differently on those. That one I just did a little carving on with my knife to rough it up a bit. That one's just a plain cutout. And then that one's a little bit of a enhanced flamier looking flame. So there you are, some Christmas decorations, pretty easy to do. That's it for this one. See ya.